When Timothy felt overwhelmed and worried and his empathy starts causing him to hurt so much, it cripples him. He didn't run away. He didn't turn off the emotions. He didn't just focus on himself. He actually leaned into it. He used that as his fuel. All right, so we're gonna talk about Philippians chapter 1 again. The idea here, what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to build a foundation. So this is our third week in Philippians, and we're getting as far as the third word. We're getting into the word Timothy. So I think it's really important that we know the background, that we understand sort of what's going on behind the scenes before we jump into the letter. Because one of the dangers of Bible study, or the dangers of reading the Bible, is that you get really linearly focused on just like one verse or one passage or one way of thinking about it, because that's how you've always thought about it. And once you get the context, and once you open it up, who wrote it, why did they write it, who they write it to, what was going on at this time, it really does open things up and allow us to understand better. So today we're going to talk about Timothy. So we'll do a quick review first. So this is a letter from the Apostle Paul, who we talked about last week. He was an incredibly passionate man. He hated Christians more than anything, so much so he would chase them down, have them arrested, dragged off to Jerusalem, and some of them killed. But then after meeting Jesus in a miraculous way, he turned all of those passions, all that fury, all that energy towards following Jesus and sharing his story with everyone in the Gentile world. And as he writes this letter, he's sitting under house arrest, waiting for trial before Caesar, because he's got a bunch of trumped up charges that have been brought against him, and he appealed to Caesar, which means he's sitting in a house under arrest, lock and key, and he's waiting to see whether or not he is going to be able to be released because Caesar says you didn't do anything wrong, or if he's going to be murdered, killed the way that the people accusing him want him to be. So he's been sitting there for months now, waiting for this. Well, during this time, as he's sitting there, he's writing letters. He's writing letters to all the churches, some of the churches that he'd been planting over the last years. He's hearing news about them, and he's getting information about them, and he's like, I better write a letter. One of those churches is in the city of Philippi. So they are the Philippians. One of those cities is in the city, or one of those letters is written to the city of Philippi, and it's the so the Philippians and Paul they're connected. They love each other. They supported his ministry. They sent him help. They were always concerned for what Paul was doing. And then as soon as they heard that he was under arrest again, and this time in Rome, they were kind of freaked out because that meant Paul could die. So they immediately sent folks to go see how he was and lend some support and what do you need and just take care of him. And so Paul was super thankful for all that support, and he wanted to write a letter to let him know thank you, and to let him know what was going on, to let him know this is exactly what God wanted, that your love is appreciated, and this is what I'm seeing, and this is what's going on. That's what the letter's all about. Paul addresses the letter from himself and from Timothy. Now, Timothy was this well-known guy. Everyone knew who Timothy was. He didn't have to explain who Timothy was, but he like everyone, because basically at this point, Paul and Timothy were like peanut butter and jelly. They just went together everywhere, and if you knew Timothy, you knew Paul. They were that close together. So let me tell a little bit of his story. Timothy was actually a Greek guy, kind of like Paul, where he grew up in a Greek city of Lystra, actually. His mom was Jewish. His dad was a Gentile. So technically, he was Jewish because of his mom, but he wasn't circumcised. He wasn't a full-fledged Israelite. He kind of grew up in a home where he had a believing women, right? Believing grandmother, believing mother, Lois and Eunice. And they taught him everything about the Bible from a very young age. And so when they were out one time, they went to a different city and they were presumably, either shopping or visiting or something. The Apostle Paul was there, and he was there talking about Jesus, and all three of them immediately believed and had and then generated some kind of close connection to Paul. He actually may have been staying at their house, like he may have walked with them and stayed at their house. Like they built a relationship. And so Paul left town, but when he came back around, so he left town after these people got saved, he comes back around, he's on his second missionary journey, and he stops in to see this family and starts to learn about what was going on in Timothy's life. How amazing Timothy had become. Now, Timothy was about 18 to 20 years old at this point, which was still considered very young then. Like Like the way we look at a 21-year-old and we're like, well, you're growing up now. You should be able to get a job, get married, join the military, rent a car, all the rest of that stuff. They thought about that about the age of 30 at this point. That's when you were finally, and so 18 to 20 years old was still considered pretty young. But he'd built such a great reputation in the whole area beyond even his hometown that Paul said, you know what? I want to take this guy with me. He's godly, he's good, he's helpful, and I want to train him up. And so brought him under his wing, made him his helper, made him his protege, trained him up as a missionary, even built him into an elder in the church. That was the idea. So he was like Paul's apprentice. So it wasn't long before Paul and Timothy had not just gone from, apprentice and teacher, but they essentially, the Bible calls them like father and son. They were inseparable. They loved one another. Timothy took care of Paul. He helped him. He was like his gopher, and Paul taught Timothy and was like his father. They had this special bond, and almost every time Paul mentions Timothy in the Bible, it's just, you see the words just glow right off the page. Like if you look, actually, let's look at what Paul says about Timothy in Philippians 2. Philippians 2, verses 19 to 24. And you'll see what I'm talking about, because he's talking about, I'm going to send Timothy, right? So if you take a look here, it says, I hope in the Lord Jesus to send Timothy to you soon, so that I too may be cheered by news of you. For I have no one like him who will be genuinely concerned for your welfare. For they all seek their own interest, not of those of Jesus Christ. But you know Timothy's proven worth, how as a son with a father he has served with me in the gospel. I therefore hope to send him just as soon as I see how it'll go with me, and I trust in the Lord that shortly I myself will come too. So you can see that he doesn't say, I'm sending Timothy, and here he comes. He's like, I'm sending you Timothy. This guy is great. And you know him, you know his reputation, you know what he's like. He's so close to me. But even though I'm in this difficult situation, I want to send him to you so that he can spread love back to you. So that's Timothy. He just glows off the page. Now, he's implicitly trusted by Paul. He has this great reputation. He's an encourager. He's a man whose motives are pure. He has a genuine concern, it says, for the churches that he served. And he wants nothing more than to follow Jesus and just share Jesus' love with people. Which is why Paul not only traveled with him, but would also send him off all the time to go help churches, right? Paul was always under attack. He was always stuck in a jail or being beaten or lost in a shipwreck or something. And so he'd be sending Timothy, okay, Timothy, I'm kind of stuck here. Go there. Or he would be too sick to travel. Okay, Timothy, go over there. He trusted him implicitly. And it was with big jobs. He would go to help churches, plant churches, choose elders, establish the churches, even confront false teachers and confront people that are trying to mess with the church. But here's the thing, and this is the part of Timothy that I connect with. And Paul. If you know Paul, he's bold, he's powerful, he's brave, he's just this scarred monster of a man. He comes in, he's willing to stand before anyone, face the consequences for the sake of the gospel. He is just like this powerhouse of spiritual energy and like a bull that comes right at you. Timothy was not. Now, Timothy was a very good man, very strong in the faith, but he was basically shy. So Paul was this ferocious tiger. Timothy was timid. He's a little mouse. In fact, when you read Paul writing about Timothy or to Timothy, for example, like 1 Corinthians, Paul actually tells the church, you need to be nice to Timothy. He says to when I come in there, when I'm coming, you better watch out and you guys better clean up your act. I'm coming in. But when he says, but I'm sending Timothy, he says, you better be nice to that guy. In fact, in Paul's first letter to Timothy, like this private letter that he sends to Timothy much later in life, almost before Paul was died, he references that Timothy basically had a perpetually sore stomach for the whole time he was together. A lot of folks believe that it was basically stress ulcers, that he was perpetually anxious all the time, and that wrecked his stomach. Now, I understand what that's like. That's actually one of the reasons I identify with Timothy, is because that's where I carry my stress too, right in my stomach. And so when things are going sideways or things are going bad, I know what's going on, even if I don't intellectually know it, because my stomach starts to hurt. Well, that's where Timothy lived. He lived in the world with a tummy ache, and Paul's like, okay, here you gotta treat that. You're gonna die of a stomach problem. But here's the thing, and this is where I wanted the Devo to go this morning. Timothy kept going. He was this nervous, timid young man who wanted nothing more than to serve Paul. He'd be happy to live in the background, happy to just serve in the churches, like be the cleanup guy, be the gopher, just, do whatever Paul wanted. But Paul kept thrusting him up into the forefront, and often, very often, into very difficult situations, stuff that was way beyond his pay grade. But, like in 1 Timothy, we learned that Paul actually sent Timothy to the city of Ephesus. And Ephesus was a huge city, probably the biggest church and biggest seminary in the entire world at the time. And it was in rough shape. There was a problem there. So it'd be like if you were 18 or 20 years old, you get sent to a mega church. Right? It's got a school, it's got a seminary, it's got multiple pastors, but it's gone sideways, right? Nobody's hardly ever believe in the gospel. It's busy like crazy, but they're not doing anything when it comes to religion. And you're told, go fix that. That it's a huge challenge for such a young man. But the thing is, Timothy went, and he kept going, even though he was in rough shape, and he kept saying yes. Not only that, he kept doing the job. Now, Timothy was afraid the whole time. He was wrecking his stomach. And yeah, Everkillian, I see, you talk about stomach problems. Anybody who knows that knows what it's like to live with a stomach problem, constantly feeling pain. Always, you're like, I don't want to go to this meeting. As soon as I walk into this meeting, I'm going to feel like someone stabbed me in the gut. That's what he lived with. He's constantly under attack. People are telling him all kinds of terrible things. He's got all these problems. And not only that, because of his age, everybody's looking down on him. They're talking down to him constantly. I can't believe you. You're only 18. What do you know? And he's coming because Paul sent him. But Timothy, despite all that, kept standing up, kept doing the job, kept telling the truth. Now, the question I have, and the question I want to talk about and leave us off with, is the question, why did he keep going? And how did he keep going? And I think that's what I want our application to be today. How did he keep going, that guy? Well, if you look back at our passage over here, you'll see, I think, a really good reason. There's two reasons, and the one big one. First, you look at verses 19 to 20, and it says, I hope in the Lord Jesus to send Timothy to you soon, that I too may be cheered by news of you. Okay, I'm sending Timothy, and he says, for I have no one like him who will be genuinely concerned for your welfare. I have no one like him who will be genuinely concerned for your welfare. That is Timothy's heart. He kept going because he had a genuine concern, a genuine love, a heartfelt feeling that drove him towards going to help others. See, sometimes we shield ourselves from others because we don't want to get involved in the drama. We know it's going to hurt us. We know we're going to get sucked in. We know it's going to be dirty. So sometimes we turn off our emotions, turn off our connections to others because we know it's going to hurt. It's going to hurt too much. It's going to hurt us. So we're like, you know what? I don't want to feel that. So I don't want to empathize. And I'm going to turn off that part of my body, my emotions. I'm sure Timothy wanted to do that all the time. You see, Paul was always in trouble. His life was always hard. He was either under attack or starving or sick all the time. And all that hard work that they were doing planting churches, every time they leave town, it was like 5 minutes before it was immediately undone by a bunch of false teachers spreading lies about Paul and Jesus and Timothy. But when Timothy felt overwhelmed and worried and his empathy starts causing him to hurt so much, it cripples him, he didn't run away. He didn't turn off the emotions. He didn't just focus on himself. He actually leaned into it. He used that as his fuel. He used the concern for others, that hurt, to drive him to action. Because he knew the job was going to be hard. He knew it was going to be miserable. It was going to be difficult. Those relationships take a lot of work. But he loved Jesus. He loved Paul. And he loved those people more than he loved himself. And so he kept going. Look at verses 21 to 23 again. You see, he says, for they, as in the other people, that he's working with, they all seek their own interests, not those of Jesus Christ. As in, if I try to send other people, like, there's no one like Timothy. Everyone is always worried a lot about themselves. But Timothy's proven worth. I was a son with a father. He has served with me in the gospel. Like, anybody hanging around Paul for that long, he's got to be committed, because Paul got himself in trouble constantly. And Timothy stuck with it, even though he was so timid, shy, weak, and young. So the challenge today, I think, for myself included, is to ask ourselves if we're allowing our love for others to overwhelm our fears. See, sometimes we get this feeling that we need to reach out to someone who's going through a tough time. We're like, okay, I should send them a note. I should send them a text. I should chat with them. But we know that the moment we do that, we're going to get sucked into the drama, and it's going to cause us pain and time and heartache and misery. And we got our own problems, right? And so instead of reaching out, we kind of put up a shell and we protect ourselves. Sometimes we'll see something in in the news or see it in social media feed, and it grabs our heart, right? You've probably had that experience. You see someone that's hurt, so an injustice is done, someone's starving, someone's in need, and for a moment, you feel their pain. We know what it's like to be them. At least a little bit, right? They're lonely. You know what loneliness is. They're afraid. You know how to feel. You know what it's like to feel afraid. Sadness, hunger, pain, sickness. We know how terrible it is to face those things and to do it alone. A lot of us know that, especially, I think, in this realm of Twitch and online gaming, and especially the gaming and streaming community. We understand, I think, better than many, because we're nerds, because we're part of a closed society, because we're part of this Twitch society. We know what it's like to be alone, to feel disconnected from the people around us, and we can empathize when we see that go by on the feed. Which is why I was actually talking to somebody yesterday. He was saying that one of the he's a Christian, and he says, sometimes you go to church and it's difficult to get to know people. They're difficult sometimes, and they have different priorities. They don't understand what it's like to be a gamer. They don't understand what it's like to enjoy streaming. They don't know anything about Minecraft or first person shooters or nothing. So how do you talk to these people? And he says, what's amazing? The overwhelming feeling that I get, the best place that I feel included. He says, I go to these conventions. I walk through the door. There is no judgment. No matter what I'm wearing, what I'm dressed up as, whatever's going on, there's an overwhelming feeling of acceptance. And I think that's because everybody there knows what it's like to be ostracized because of an interest. So my challenge to you is this. Don't dismiss the feeling when you feel that empathetic pull towards someone else. Don't run away from the situation. Don't ignore the problem. Don't just delete the post and ignore it simply because you know it's going to have a cost for you. But instead, take a minute to sit in that feeling. Allow yourself to experience it. And then think, okay, if I were that person, what would I want someone to do for me? Ask God, okay, well, what am I supposed to do with this feeling? Am I supposed to reach out? Am I supposed to try to help? Should I do something? Like this emotion, I've connected to someone. Am I supposed to do something with it? Maybe it means you pray for that person. Maybe it means you give them a phone call. Maybe it means an encouraging note. Maybe it means sending a few bucks. Now, my point is that instead of doing the usual thing where you run from that feeling, close that feeling off, allow yourself to feel it. Use that empathy, that pain, that concern you begin to feel for someone else to drive you to ask the question, what would I want someone to do for me if I was in this situation? If you knew that there was someone out there that looked at your life and went, I know what that's like. What would you want them to do for you? And then, despite all the voices inside saying, protect yourself, don't get involved, it's going to be a mess, challenge yourself to reach out, even in a small way. Do it wisely, do it prayerfully. Obviously, I'm not saying, put yourself in danger. I mean, Sure, there's a time for that, but that's not what I'm talking about. I'm saying just even in a small way, see if you can work out that empathy muscle today or this week. Next time something crosses your mind or crosses your heart or crosses your feed or you connect with someone. And then if you do that, I would love to hear about it. Tell me about it in the chat. Join the Discord. You'll see links all over the place. And then if you do, come back and tell us about it. Tell the chat about it. Tell the Discord about it. Because I'd love to know not only what happened in you, how you connected to someone, but maybe there's a way we can help you help them. That's the Devo today.